record button whenever I say something that's so. So the foundation that happened before, when school districts were promised that they would be given whole state aid, and it never got there. So schools ended up getting 1 year's worth of that foundation aid, and then there was like a drought following that. So those promises aren't binding. And even that those promises are going to end in 3 years. So 3 years from now, we're probably going to find ourselves in a situation where we're relatively flat. So unless we make good decisions now, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we either have a hole, and that hole can be filled by cuts, or it can be filled by raising taxes. And we're limited at how much we can raise taxes by. So even though it's a bummer to be the person to say this, having more money, getting more money also presents problems. Although, again, much better to have it than not to have it. The other thing that I want to remind everybody is that while the newspapers report that schools are getting all this stimulus money, and some school districts are getting a tremendous amount of stimulus money, this money can't be used for anything that schools need to fund. It's conditional. So you can use this stimulus money in certain ways, and we have to apply to be able to use it. We can't get aid on the stimulus money that we spend. And so it's not as if it replaces money that we would spend out of our general budget. So it's not as easily spent as people might think it is. So it might very well be that some school districts seem flush with cash, but still can't buy the things that they need. And what we don't want to do is change our program around to fit the money we have. We want to make sure that we're using money to fund the program that we want to have. So that's all I wanted to update you on the most recent state budget. And in Jeff's presentation, we'll have a chance to talk about those things too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. Does anybody have any questions or anything that Jim went over? Okay, then I will turn it over to Jeff and we'll go through the budget workshop. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, looks like, so good evening. This is the proposed budget for 21-22. And I will actually let Jim start out with the first slide for the summary of the proposed budget.
Yeah, so just to give you some highlights about some things that we're trying to do with this budget. So one of the things that we've been trying to do all along is to add that music teacher back to the junior, senior high school. As you know, we had a retirement. We didn't replace that music teacher because we weren't sure what was going to happen with the budget. That was a wise decision to kind of hold off on that hire. However, now knowing what we know about the budget next year, we feel very comfortable that we can add that position back in. We are also adding a position that's an assistant principal / middle school program coordinator. And we're returning the director of athletics and instruction. We eliminated that position. We're putting the AD back into the extracurricular schedule that teachers have. So that'll be a teacher with a stipend. We also are spending some resources to do some curriculum development. So there's a lot of work that we're going to be doing this summer, and also throughout the year, to make sure that we're supporting our teachers, that they're able to do the work that they need to do to make sure that our curriculum is strong. Having that staff development, so we're doing some staff development too over the summer and over the course of next year in equity training for district leaders, so that we can make sure that we're also have an eye on improving school culture and making the school more comfortable for all of our students. There are some insurance cost increases. We're also going to be increasing some costs to instructional technology. Certainly, you know that we've gone to a one-to-one environment for teachers and students. And so we'd like to continue with that one-to-one environment and get on a schedule where we're replacing older Chromebooks with new ones, but also looking at our classrooms and making sure that the technology in the classrooms is being upgraded so that we can really do more things more flexibly in classrooms than we have been able to do in the past, adding in big interactive touch screens, giving teachers the ability to do web conferencing on the fly, increasing audio support in the classroom so that everybody in classrooms can hear everything that the teacher's saying. We also are looking to transition back into one bus run, a K-12 bus run. So we're planning on doing that, provided that there's no restrictions preventing us from doing that in the fall. And we're proposing no cuts to any instructional programs or student opportunities, including athletics. And so this is a budget that's really trying to build and grow instead of one that's trying to pare away.
All right, so this is an overall look at the overall budget, proposed budget, and we're at 17. Overall, the budget for 21-22 is proposed to be $17,885,000. That's a total increase, a spending increase of $320,000, or only 1.82% from budget to budget. And then with a tax levy increase of only 1.95%, which represents $160,396. So again, this is just a summary of the things that we talked about on the prior slide. This you'll actually see this at a glance a couple times in this presentation, because those are the important numbers to know about the budget. So next we'll talk about the revenue budget, which was very much unknown until the state actually came out with their budget at the very late hours of what was it, April 1st or April 2nd. So here are the numbers broken down for what we actually budgeted for state aid. Overall, from budget to budget, we're looking at only a $47,185, and this is actually what was budgeted. So currently, what we were actually given in our state aid runs is actually less than what we had budgeted for the 2020-2021 school year budget. So what we're actually receiving from the state this year is less than what we had planned on. So there's going to be that gap also in how we finish the year. So I mean, right now our budget for 2021, we are looking good. So we won't have to, we won't be in the red, but overall, when the state takes away money mid-year or after our budgets are made, this is what we're kind of stuck with these gaps. So that's why I kind of highlighted that $220,000 on the bottom. So the biggest change for us, starting right from the top, is the foundation aid. That was the big game changer. So what we had talked about during all of our work sessions was we had originally seen the number of $4,888,467, and this was the same number that we kept seeing. So we saw that for 2021, but we had also seen that for 1920. So they repeated it for 2021, and then they were also threatening that we were going to see it for 21-22. So we're very grateful to see that the foundation aid actually did increase that 3% to that $5,035,000. So looking forward, also down to the expense-based aids. You got BOCES, hardware and software, library and textbook, and then transportation. So those are also expense-based aids that were included in that special services aids that were also threatened to be consolidated. Fortunately, the budget came through, and those will not be broken down, so we can still utilize our expense-based aids. So we're looking at a possibility of around $100,000 for in BOCE's aid, and that'll fluctuate by the time we get to again to next year to this point, because the BOCE's aid again from 2021, it also has fluctuated again from what they're actually giving us on the state aid runs. So most of these numbers, I won't go through all of them, but the transportation aid, for instance, for the 2021 school year budget, that has actually decreased a little bit. But this is what we're budgeting for 21-22 is that $1,680,000. So, and that's just based on what our estimates are right now based on expenses. Also, the building aids, that is pretty much set in stone based on what our current debt service is. So that has not fluctuated that greatly. So that's kind of those numbers are what we had expected as it is. This is the same tax levy slide that we've seen in past presentations during the work session. So we had determined that the tax cap was actually at 4.45%, which allows the district to increase taxes up to $365,839. However, the district is going out with a responsible cap levy increase at 1.95%, which only gives us a overall dollar increase of $160,396. It's a very similar cap or tax levy that we took on for the 2021 school year budget. Last year, we only utilized 1.9% while we had a cap of 5.11. So we've continued to go out with a much lower tax levy than our actual tax levy or tax cap allowed. So our total tax levy amount will be at $8,385,866. And that would lead us right into the actual revenue summary. So you can see that between the real property taxes and state aid, we're right around that 46.
Jeff, before we go onto that, can you go back to the last slide that you had?
Absolutely.
I just want to make the point here, because this is something that you'll see as other districts are publishing their budget numbers. So the question that community members may have is, so you're getting more money than you had anticipated. Why not go out at a cut or a 0% tax levy? And so the answer to that is really simple, and that is, so we're not just budgeting for this current year, we're budgeting for several years down the road. And so it wouldn't be very responsible to come in at a lower number now if what that means is that we're going to have to jack up the levy to the max cap allowed 3 years down the road when that foundation aid isn't increasing any longer. So it's a much more responsible way to go to gradually increase that instead of springing substantial increases on taxpayers. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jeff, but I know that the question will come up, so I just wanted to address that.
Well, this goes back to your lovely Wile E. Coyote cartoon that
Right.
We're trying to plan for that fiscal cliff. I wish I had used that cartoon actually in one of my presentations, but we had talked about the fiscal cliff being, coming up in a couple of years, especially when we were talking about those the state aid numbers earlier on. Well, now that fiscal cliff, it's still a possibility to happen, but it just got prolonged. So now it's going to be further on down the road. So we still have to plan for that. And in order to continue our programs and not have to have that threat to cut programs in the future, it's important that we have the ability to aid our budget with the funds, because we're either going to be leveled with state aid, and it's either going to go flat, or heck, it could be reduced, based on whatever calculation you decide to come up with next. Unfortunately, it's out of our control. So with the threat that cliff is going to come up, this is our way of planning in a gentle way that we're gonna be able to fund our budget, and we're not going to have any fiscal problems. There are other districts that don't plan ahead, and they go out with you can go out with really low numbers for years, and then you find out that you got to go out with an enormous number and exceed the tax cap in the future. And that's what we don't want to do, is ask the public to exceed the tax cap, because it could be a really substantial number.
Thanks, Jeff.
So when we put those numbers together, the real property taxes and the state aid, we're right around, we're still staying in that balance of around 46 to 47% between real property taxes and state aid right now for 21-22. And again, once that fiscal cliff hits, that may all change, that real property taxes may be a little bit more, but still may help us to balance our budget. So that being said, there still is a little bit of a gap because keeping in mind that we did not have a foundation aid increase for 2021. So we kept that $4.8 million that we had the prior year, and that didn't give us an increase for 2021. So because of that, there's still kind of, we can look at it as a possible loss of money. And the way that we say that is the growth for the district's budget it still has to go up with the cost of increase, the cost increases for programs, the cost increase for contractual, any programs and opportunities that we want to provide for kids, and of course supplies, and personnel and health costs as well. So with that, we are also utilizing a little bit more fund balance and reserves than we have in the past. So between the two, we're utilizing $884,869, and to stay consistent with last year and with our reserve fund plans, we've put back in $100,000 to utilize out of the ERS fund if we get to that point where we need to balance our budget at the end of the year, and we will balance our budget using our reserves and our fund balances to stay responsible with our fund balance that we've got in our accounts. So that brings us to the 17,885,000, and then just keeping in mind, I just noted that already, the foundation aid did not increase for 2021. Okay, so this is just an overall visual of the revenues of the budget, just a look at between 46 and 47% on the real property taxes and state aid. And then the fund balance and reserves, that makes up only about 4.95% of our revenues as well. So between the two of them, we had shown that during the work session. It was just shown in fund balance, but we've broken that out now so that it utilizes both categories of fund balance and reserves. So this is just a summary of the revenue budget, the state aid based on the new budget. This is all based on just the most recent proposal that we had from the state. We've got this positive outlook over the next few years, but we don't know what's going to happen after that promise goes away. So looking at that foundation aid, and increases overall at 3%, which is a pretty fair number compared to prior years. The total tax levy only increases at 1.95%, while the tax cap is actually 4.45%. And it includes the use of about 4.95% in fund balance and reserves instead of the larger tax increases. This number is a little bit higher than we've had in prior years, just because of the fact that we've got to balance our budget with that from that gap that we had. So just to kind of put some long range planning, just a look perspective at the long range for us and into the budget as well, is that foundation will continue to increase in the future years, could drop off. But the district also needs to be aware of the potential fiscal cliffs as promised in the increases, and we will need to plan for rising costs and benefits and contractual items. So that's all the things that we've kind of put into the budget this year. Thoughts in planning ahead, and that we can also utilize reserve funds gently to fill the gaps in funding for potential shortfalls in state funding. So we'll continue to look at that reserve plan and utilize that in conjunction with some of these gaps that we've had over the past couple of years, and then looking forward to years in the future, we'll also be looking at that as well. So it may be a possibility, and when we can. It is encouraged that we also try and to fund those reserve funds for that year that it starts to drop off or level out. So this is a look at the expense budget. This is pretty much a summary of what you'll see also on the in board docs. But this is kind of just a broad outlook at, you know, what the different categories of the budget. Just giving you a summary of that proposed budget is going to be $17,885. Looking at that $320,000 increase with a tax levy increase of $160. And this is just a graphic of what the actual overall budget expenses are in each of the categories. So you can see that instructional, the largest part of our budget, makes up almost 50% of our actual overall budget. While operations and maintenance, it's a little over 7%. Transportation at over 6%. Medical and benefits, that represents 20% of our budget. And then the debt service representing about 11%, and operation in general would be 5.69. So that would be the lowest amount, but you can see just a breakdown of these categories as well. So this is the three-part component budget summary that we are also required to show. So you can see from year to year, it hasn't really changed too much, but there have been some expenses that increased in capital. So that actually reduced the percentage in the program category. We also increased the administrative a little bit. So again, that kind of filters back to the program budget percentage going back down to about just very, very little over 73%. So from year to year, though, there hasn't been that much of a change in each one of these categories. And just an overall summary, here's the budget, $17,885,000. This is going to be what's going to be on the voting ballot on May 18th. And in addition to Proposition 2. So we'll also be asking the public to purchase 2 30-passenger buses and 1 71-passenger bus. And all of these buses will be fueled with gasoline. So in prior years, we have purchased propane buses, not in the past several years actually, but we've also found that the gasoline buses, they travel a lot further for field trips when we get to go do that again, and for sporting events. The bus purchases total is actually less than we had last year. It's at 242,000, or not to exceed 242,000. Our actual estimate came in less than that. So those 2 30-passenger buses and the 71-passenger bus will not exceed that cost. And that is it. I'd like to remind everybody, don't forget to vote on the 18th.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have any questions for Jeff? Excellent. Jeff,
Good. Thank you.
Continue to appreciate the level of detail. Great summary and nice wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on for our presentation and approval of prior Board of Education meeting minutes. There's a recommendation that the Board of Education accept the meeting minutes from the March, my dates are, sorry, give me 1 second. March 23rd, 2021 meeting as submitted. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Shane. We have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Diane. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. So moving on to new business, the Board of Education Standing Committee reports. I think I'm going to get it right this time. I believe Buildings and Grounds met since our last meeting. Is that correct? Jim, I'm seeing you nod. So I'm thinking I've got that one right. So if we want to do an update on that committee, we can start there.
Yes. We met. We're looking for a new architect to represent the district. And I forget how many people responded to the RFP. But in the end, we narrowed it down to 3 firms to interview. And we interviewed 2 on March 30th, 1 on March 31st. I thought they were all pretty good, but, the overall opinion was that, there was one that was better than the others. And I think Jim and staff kind of did some background checks and they panned out pretty good. So, I think I know who Jim's going to recommend, but I don't know if anyone on the committee or Jim, if you want to add anything.
No, just that, yeah, like Shane said, I was really impressed with the quality of all three firms that we saw. There was one that stood out, and really it was because of their kind of close attention to our needs, to our goals as a district, and also their kind of vision for the design of certain areas that are in need of improvement that really made them rise to the top. So I think that it's a good decision, and so we're working on that, and then we should be able to present. Hopefully, we have a contract to present to the board before too long. Hopefully, at the next meeting, but if not, definitely the one after that, because we have some work that we'd like to get started on. But I just want to just to thank the committee for their time. So Shane and Diane and Betsy spent a lot of time going through RFP submissions and also interviewing the candidates, and also Anna and Jeff for being involved in that. So my first time going through a process like that, and I think that it was pretty solid.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Appreciate everything that all of you did to get us to that point, and look forward to seeing the final recommendation. Teresa, did policy meet? I know that
we didn't meet again. We have a meeting on the 27th. We're going to review just 4 policies that have come up since we've reviewed the entire policy manual. And Jim's been in touch with Erie, just kind of checking on the status of that. And it's in the works. It's coming. So as soon as we have it, everyone will have it. But we're there.
Are we having a policy manual party?
I would like to propose that. That would be great.
I think the time that you've dedicated to that, you and other members of the board over the last couple of years, that seems deserved.
It sounds like a good idea. Thanks.
Excellent. I don't think there were any others that I'm aware of. Okay. So we will move on to financial items. First item is adopt the 2021-2022 school budget and property tax report card. Recommendation that the Board of Education adopt the 2021-2022 school year budget in the amount of $17,885,000, adopt the 2021-2022 property tax report card, and to levy the necessary 1.95% tax, therefore, as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Diane. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Teresa. Any questions or comments? Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. Move on to accept claims auditor report. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the claims auditor report comments on the general warrant A15 for $120,576.33 dated March 17th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Diane. Any questions or comments?
I had one question, and that I had about the face masks order. Is that the one from the fall? It's on page 6.
No,
Or is that new? Because it was like $8,000.
it is not new. I'm sorry, it is new. It was a recent one, about a month and a half ago.
Are those the reusable ones with the Dwaynesburg logo on them, or is that what we're spending on disposable face masks? It's more out of curiosity than anything else.
It's disposable face masks.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We'll move on to accept financial reports. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the appropriation status, budget transfer, revenue status, and treasurer's reports ending February 28, 2021, as provided by the treasurer and recommended by Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Betsy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Shane. Any questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, last item on financial, approved establishment of additional bank accounts. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education authorize the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services to establish separate bank accounts for the purpose of tax collection and electronic fees collection within the district's official bank depository. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Teresa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Moving on to other items, accept CSE minutes. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the CSE CPSE meetings and their minutes from the March 16th, 17th, 19th, 24th, 29th, and 30th meetings. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Diane. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Moving on to personnel. First item up is approve appointments. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following appointments as recommended by the Superintendent and Athletic Director. ECA appointments are for the applicable 2020-2021 school year and sports season, beginning with preseason practice and ending at the conclusion of the season, including sectional play. All appointments are employees at will. An appointment at this time does not guarantee employment for the entire school year, season, term, or year. The salary for ECA clubs, activities, and athletic positions will be prorated based on the length of the season term year. The operation of certain clubs and activities are subject to COVID-19 related restrictions. And I'm just going to say appointments as listed on the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Shane. Diane, you want a second?
Sure, I'll second it.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, moving on. Approve request for leave of absence. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the family medical leave of absence by requested by Kelly Ferris, first grade teacher, effective May 3rd, 2021 through June 25th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Teresa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Betsy. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. Amend date of hire for L. Simpson. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the amended hire date of Leah Simpson, teacher aide, from April 12th, 2021 to April 14th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
I think it was either Diane or Shane, because she'll ask
Or
you.
Shane.
Are there any
Shane can
questions
go.
or? Okay, we'll take Shane. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we're going to move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. And Jim requested that we put the Employee Relations Committee as a discussion item. Some question around whether we want to continue this committee or we want to keep addressing these issues at the entire board level as we have been doing thus far. So Jim, I'll let you give us some background on that thought.
So Camille had been chairing the Employee Relations Committee. It's my intention to always have these kinds of employment discussions with the entire board and not just a subcommittee. I think that it's important that everybody be involved in these kinds of decisions. So I wondered if the board might want to, instead of appointing a new chair for the committee, to just sort of discontinue the Employee Relations Committee and continue handling employee relations matters in executive session with the entire board.
And I did ask Jim, there is no requirement for us to have this particular committee. So do any of the board members have comments or questions?
Forgive me, I didn't look up the kind of the charge of that committee, but what's the boundary conditions that are set out for it to operate under currently? Does anyone know that offhand?
It's a good question. I think it's only met one time this year. So I'm not familiar with how it's been used in the past.
In general, we have leveraged it to discuss some of the employment contracts at a general level, certainly not an individual specific level, but general terms. We've also discussed some of the programming desires or, some of the plans that were coming up and brought things up. I think these are all, in my opinion, items that the entire board should be participating in and certainly could weigh in on. It wouldn't be my intention to not discuss those, but rather discuss it with a larger group in executive session. But those are the typical things. I don't have the exact charge, Shane. We can definitely look that up. But those are the types of things that we've discussed in that committee in the past.
Okay, thanks.
So Jim, Celeste, how do we proceed in terms of move forward plan with this? Is there any official thing required, any action?
I don't think it requires a vote. Yeah, so we would just decide to not have that committee. If at some point, what I would suggest is to kind of not have that on the agenda. If there's a need down the road to have a subcommittee for employee relations, then we can talk about bringing it back for that purpose. But I would say it hasn't been needed so far. And so maybe just leave it off the agenda.
Any of the board members object to that path forward? Okay. Excellent. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is information. I think this is our last look at the board meeting calendar before something official happens with it.
I think that's right. I think this is our last time to discuss it. Again, I don't think that this one doesn't require an acceptance vote or anything like that. So it's just our last chance to weigh in on it before we, distribute it to you and you mark your calendars.
Right. And it also goes out to any of the new folks that are that get selected for the board for the upcoming years, upcoming terms.
That makes sense. Okay. Does any of the board members have questions about it? Are we all good? Okay. That's great. So at this time, the board seeks to enter into executive session to discuss the employment history of a particular employee. We do not intend to come back to general session to conduct any business. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Diane. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tony. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we will move. I believe that Jim sent out a separate link for the executive session, so we will not be coming back to the public meeting. We will wrap up an executive session for the evening.
Jeff, I
Thank
think
you,
I left
everybody.
you off, but I'm going to send it to you now, okay?
Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Thank you.